The house was quiet in that way only midnight can deliver, heavy, stretched thin, and honest enough to make you hear your own heartbeat. Outside, the cul-de-sac slept like it always did, trimmed lawns and perfect hedges, dreaming suburban dreams. Inside, I kept my own kind of watch. Not the kind with a flashlight and a badge, but the quiet vigil of a man who knows trouble doesn't knock, it crawls. Jake was upstairs, 10 years old and snoring softly, locked safe behind the door, I reinforced. After Sarah died, he was wearing his mustard camp t-shirt. Sneakers abandoned by the door like he'd meant to guard the house with me, but got ambushed by sleep instead. He doesn't know it, but he's the reason for the fortress, the cameras tucked into vents, the sensors glued into every corner, the kind of hardware you'd expect in a spy thriller. Not a 2-bedroom with vinyl siding. Me. I sat in the old leather chair, laptop glowing on the ottoman, screen full of emails I hadn't read, and a half-finished spreadsheet that wasn't fooling anyone. I wasn't working. I was waiting. It's been my life for 2 years. Ever since Sarah was gone, the silence wasn't peace anymore. It was something to manage, something to guard against. That's when the buzz came. Not a loud, in-your-face alarm, just a soft vibration against my wrist. My watch, 1 pulse, 1 code. LNDW1, laundry room window sensor 1, not a glitch. I don't do glitches. Every night at 10 I run diagnostics like a priest lighting candles, ritual precise, never skipped. This was real. I didn't leap up like they do in movies. My body didn't even flinch. I just closed the laptop, exhaled slow, and straightened my back. Navy shirt, faded jeans, bare feet, nothing else. I moved with the kind of calm that makes people nervous because calm means you're ready. Adrenaline is for rookies. Adrenaline gets you killed. The cops once told me my problems were civil. That's their polite way of saying, not our problem. They shrugged at the violation notices, the harassment, the way Sarah cried the night she found one stuffed in our mailbox with the words, "Clean it up," or else scribbled on top, "Sybil," like it was a parking ticket. That's when I learned what every single father in the world eventually learns. No one is coming. Sarah would have hated the way I turned the house into a fortress. She loved open windows, fresh air, morning sunlight. Now every window had steel pins, every door reinforced, every cheerful shutter hiding something heavier behind it. She would have said I let fear win. Maybe she was right, but she wasn't. Here to see the way people looked at Jake in the street, or how the notices piled up from our HOA president. Karen Blackman. Karen was a retired cop, with a smile that looked more like a mugshot. She patrolled our neighborhood like she'd been elected queen of suburbia, and every rule in the handbook was her royal decree. 2 inches too far with the basketball hoop, weeds in the garden, a trash can left out 5 minutes past curfew. Petty things. But with her, petty turned toxic, and now my watch said she wasn't content with paper notices and neighborly sneers. LNDW1, the laundry window. I moved through the house like a ghost. The layout was muscle memory now. Every floorboard that creaked, every hinge that wind, I knew them better than my own face. I glanced at the red light blinking on the hidden panel behind the hallway painting. Confirmed breach. No mistakes. The tablet lit up in my hand, low light. Camera painting the laundry room in shades of gray. And there it was, the window sliding open, a shadow crawling in. First a sleeve, then a knee, inch by inch, like a cat slinking onto a counter it knows it's not supposed to touch. Slow, careful, arrogant. She thought she was the predator, but she had no idea. She'd already walked into a cage, and I was the one holding the key. At 2:14 a.m., the house twitched. Not in a dramatic, horror movie kind of way, with rattling pipes and doors slamming. No, my house is smarter than that. It whispered. A single buzz against my wrist, faint enough to be mistaken for a muscle twitch if you weren't waiting for it. But I was waiting. I'm always waiting. The code blinked on my watch. LNDW1. Laundry window sensor. Breach. I didn't leap up like Bruce Willis crawling through the Nakatomi Plaza. No adrenaline, no panicked scramble. That's the thing about adrenaline. They sell it in movies as some kind of secret weapon. But in real life, it's sloppy. It makes you drop things, slam doors, step where the floorboards squeal like a snitch. My system isn't designed for drama. It's designed for survival. Calm, steady, precise. The laptop on the ottoman hummed to sleep as I closed it with a soft click. I was already moving before the screen went black. Navy t-shirt, faded jeans, bare feet. The gear of a man who knows he doesn't need gear. Every step was placed where the boards were loyal, avoiding the ones that whined. The air in the house didn't shift. Even the silence didn't notice me. And there, in that heavy midnight stillness, I thought of Sarah. She used to leave the laundry window open. Let the morning air roll in while she folded sheets and hummed under her breath. If she were here, she'd have laughed at me for turning that same window into a tripwire. She'd have said, "David, you're letting fear run the house." Maybe she'd be right. But she wasn't here anymore. And fear is better than regret. The hidden panel in the hall glowed with a tiny red dot. Confirmed breach. No false alarms. My system doesn't play jokes. I reached for the tablet on the hall table, screen lighting up in green-gray hues. Laundry room camera. Low light, but clear enough to make out shapes. The window was open. The curtain stirred like a breath, and then movement. A shadow slid in slow, careful. First an arm, then a knee. The dark shape stretched and bent, inching into my house like it had all the time in the world. I watched, breath steady. I'd been expecting this. For weeks, the notices kept coming. Grass too long, trash can visible. Jake's basketball hoop, exactly 2 inches closer to the sidewalk than regulation allowed. My personal favorite, decorative shutters not consistent with neighborhood aesthetic. That one came with a photocopied page of rules, underlined 3 times in red pen. Every letter signed the same way. HOA President, Karen Blackman. If you've never met a retired cop with nothing better to do than terrorize cul-de-sac dads, consider yourself blessed. Karen didn't just enforce rules, she patrolled them. Morning, noon, midnight. If she saw you drag your trash bin to the curb a minute too early, she'd file it in her mental police report. She treated our little neighborhood like Gotham City. Only instead of Batman, we got her armed with a clipboard, a flashlight, and a thirst for control that no amount of therapy was ever going to quench. The crazy part, I knew it would come to this. People like Karen don't stop at paper notices. They escalate. Power is a drug, and compliance is their high. They don't care about the rules. They care about the rush of bending someone else to them, and me. A widower with a messy garden and a quiet kid. I was the perfect target. So yeah, I planted a tracker in her last violation notice. Just a tiny thing, small enough to disappear between the folds of paper. She thought she was delivering another strike in her holy HOA war. What she didn't know was that she was carrying a breadcrumb right back to me. And here she was now, belly crawling through my laundry room window at 2:14 in the morning. Not even subtle about it. You had to hand it to her, though the woman was committed. While most people were asleep, dreaming about beach vacations or stress-seeding donuts in their subconscious, Karen was sneaking into my house under the banner of a midnight compliance sweep. Her words, not mine. I pressed record on the tablet, my voice low, steady, time-stamped. This is David Mercer. Laundry room breach. 2:14 a.m. Not for theatrics, not for intimidation. For evidence. That's what separates paranoia from preparation. Receipts. On the screen, I watched her legs swing over the sill, her body wriggling like some kind of middle-aged cat burglar. She had the slow patience of someone who's done this before, or at least thought about it enough times to practice in the mirror. You could almost admire the technique if it weren't happening in your own damn laundry room. She thought she was quiet. She thought she was clever. She thought she was the predator. But she was wrong, because every move she made, the house whispered to me. Every shift of weight on the floor, every displaced molecule of air, every change in infrared temperature, though, system caught it, recorded it, logged it. She wasn't crawling into my house. She was crawling into a trap. I moved down the hall, slow and silent. A wedge slid under the hallway door so it wouldn't creak. My steps ghosted past Jake's room. He was still asleep, soft breaths muffled by his closed door. For a moment, I hated the world for making me drag him into this. Hated that a boy his age needed a panic button beside his bed, that he had to learn how to press it without making a sound. Childhood should be sneakers by the door, not backup alarm drills. I paused, hand against the cool wall, and breathed, in, out, calm. This wasn't anger. This wasn't fear. This was the moment all the long nights, soldering wires, and coding scripts, had been for Dot. And in the laundry room, the self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac was on her knees, muttering about violations as she shuffled deeper into my house. Let her crawl. I was ready, because she didn't know it yet. But tonight wasn't about compliance. Tonight was about consequence, and Karen Blackman was about to learn the difference. Jake has always been a light sleeper, the kind of kid who could hear a squirrel sneeze outside and sit up in bed like it was a fire drill. I used to think it was because of Meeb, because the house had turned into a maze of locks and sensors and hidden switches, and he'd absorbed that edge. But the truth is, some kids are just wired that way. Tonight, it saved us. I didn't know it yet. I was down the hall, watching Karen Blackman squeeze her way into my laundry room, like she was auditioning for a community theater reboot of Mission Impossible. What I didn't see was that upstairs, behind his locked door, Jake's own system had stirred to life. The secondary alarm, the one I installed just for him, a smaller cousin to the big network that watched the house. Stripped down and simple, built into a black box tucked near his bed. It wasn't much to look at: some wires, a green LED light, and a red button, but it was Jake's, his backup, his piece of the defense. Most dads teach their kids how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball. I taught mine how to press a button, without panicking. He was 10 years old, and he had a panic button. Sometimes I hated myself for that. But then I'd remember Sarah, remember how the cops had shrugged at her fear, called it civil, and I knew better a panic button than no button at all. So when the faint buzz of my watch triggered the faint buzz of his box, Jake's eyes cracked open. He didn't sit up fast. He didn't gasp. He did what we practiced. He lay still, listened, and then slowly reached out his hand. His fingers brushed the cool plastic. He pressed down. Silent alarm. No blaring sirens, no flashing strobes. Just a whisper of code, shot through the house network like a secret. His button didn't just ping. MIT pinged everything. My tablet, the backup server I keep in the garage, the drive tucked in the false bottom of my desk drawer. Layer after layer, like Russian nesting dolls of paranoia, or preparation, depending on your point of view. And that's when the tablet in my hand blinked. Not just the feed from the laundry room, not just the data from the sensors. A new alert, child node activated. For a second, I froze. That line of text hit harder than the buzz on my wrist. My kid was awake. My kid had heard, and my kid had pressed the button. I felt the kind of pride you don't brag about, the kind that doesn't feel right to admit out loud. He had done exactly what I taught him: calm, quiet, controlled. But mixed with that pride was a knot in my chest, because pressing that button meant something had changed. He wasn't just a passenger anymore, tucked away while I handled the storm. He was part of the crew. He had taken the wheel, even for a second. I hadn't wanted that. I wanted him safe, untouched by the ugliness that seeped into our lives the night Sarah was gone. I wanted him dreaming about video games and field trips, not clutching a silent alarm like it was a lifeline. Childhood should be light. It should be messy and careless and full of scraped knees. Not coded drills, but the world doesn't care what childhood should be. The world delivers what it wants. And tonight, it delivered Karen Blackman, belly crawling across my laundry tiles. Like a snake in yoga pants, the feed on my tablet sharpened as Jake's alarm boosted the signal. Suddenly I wasn't just watching her shape slide through the window, I was watching her mutter under her breath, the mic picking up words like violation and unacceptable. She was narrating her own crime like a bad cop show, and there it was, proof, her voice, her face, her body on camera. Every move locked into the system Jake had just made unbreakable. If I went down tonight, if something happened to me, the data was already bouncing 2 servers outside these walls. The story wouldn't die here, all because my kid pressed a button. I leaned against the wall. Just for a second, the weight of it, all pressing back. For 2 years, I had been the shield, the builder, the watcher. And in one small, silent act, Jake had stepped across that line. He wasn't just protected anymore. He was part of the defense. I didn't know if Sarah would have been proud or horrified. Probably both. She would have hated that her son was dragged into this shadow game. But she would have loved the courage in him, the way he didn't freeze, didn't panic. She always said he was braver than I gave him credit for. Tonight, she was right. I straightened, focus snapping back to the gray-lit feed of Karen fumbling in the dark. She had no idea the house had already turned against her. She had no idea the boy asleep upstairs had just sealed her fate with one quiet press of a button. She thought she was in control, that she was the hunter creeping through my territory. But she was already outnumbered. It wasn't just me anymore. It was me and Jake, and together, we were ready. Karen thought she was the hunter. You could see it in the way she moved, slow, careful, like a lioness stalking prey across the savannah. Except this wasn't the savannah. This was my laundry room, and instead of gazelles, she was creeping past a hamper full of mismatched socks, and one of Jake's old science fair posters that still smelled faintly of vinegar. She had no idea. Every step she took was being recorded from 3 different angles. The motion sensors picked up the heat signature of her body. The microphones caught her muttering under her breath, and the silent alarm Jake had pressed upstairs had locked every digital door behind her. She thought she'd slipped inside my house, quiet as a whisper. What she didn't realize was that the moment she wriggled through that window, the house had swallowed her whole. She wasn't in my space anymore. She was in my system. I moved down the hall with the patience of someone who'd rehearsed this 100 times. The wedge under the hallway door held steady. The boards that betrayed weight got skipped, and the shadows did their job, wrapping me up like an ally. I didn't need to see her with my eyes. I had cameras for that. Tiny eyes tucked into corners, vents, behind a decorative clock Sarah once bought at a yard sale. The house wasn't just for walls, it was alive, awake, watching with me. On the tablet in my hand, Karen shuffled further inside. She whispered words like non-compliant and violation. Her voice the soundtrack of a power-drunk mall cop who never got promoted. She didn't realize she was narrating her own break, like a bad audio. I watched her step into the hall, her flashlight beam low and nervous. Skimming across family photos, she pretended not to notice. It was surreal, this woman who'd spent years telling me my grass was too long, my shutters too bland, my trash can too visible. Now tiptoeing past the framed photo of Jake, holding a fishing pole twice his size. She walked past Sarah's smile, frozen in glass. I felt my chest tighten. She didn't belong here. Not in this hallway. Not near them. And then her head tilted, her flashlight catching the outline of a door. Jake's door. I didn't move at first. I just watched. My heartbeat didn't spike, but something colder settled in. This wasn't about notices on paper anymore. This wasn't about lawns and basketball hoops. This was a predator moving toward my son's room. And that was the line. The last line? I tightened my grip on the tablet. The system had already shifted into lockdown after Jake's trigger. Every window sealed with steel pins. Every exit bolted. The shutters behind the fake shutters had slid into place. She was in, but she wasn't getting out. Not until I decided. Karen muttered again, something about order and consequences. I wanted to laugh. She sounded like a villain who got cut from The Incredibles because the writers thought she was too. And here she was, breaking into my home in the middle of the night, talking about community order while heading toward a 10-year-old's room. I slipped closer, moving like a shadow behind her. I knew every inch of this house, every trick of its voice. The cameras fed me her every twitch. The microphones carried her breath to my ears. I didn't need adrenaline. I didn't need fury. All I needed was patience. Sarah's voice flickered in my mind, her saying I was letting fear win. Her saying the house felt like a bunker. Maybe she was right. But tonight, watching Karen inch closer to Jake's door, I knew this wasn't fear. This was survival. This was what standing guard meant. The hallway stretched longer than it ever had before. Jake's door at the far end, shut tight, locked, fortified. Karen's shadow swayed across it, her hand lifting like she was about to test the knob. That was it. That was the moment. She thought she was the predator. She thought she'd stalked her way into the den of some messy, rule-breaking neighbor. She could scare straight. But she hadn't. She'd crawled into a cage designed by a man with nothing left to lose. And now she was 1 inch from the door. That meant everything to me. The line wasn't blurry anymore. It was bright, bold, undeniable, and she'd just stepped over it. Karen's hand hovered inches from the knob of Jake's door when I finally stepped out of the dark. She didn't see me at first. Her flashlight beam jittered across the wood grain, trembling, maybe from nerves or maybe from the sheer thrill. She thought she was writing. I could hear her muttering under her breath, words like non-compliant and community standards, as if any of that meant a damn thing at 2 in the morning when she was crawling through a window like a burglar. "Don't touch that door," I said, my voice low and even. The words cut through the silence like a knife. Her shoulders stiffened, flashlight jerking to the side, beams scattering across the wall. Then she turned, slow, like someone realizing the monster they were hunting had been standing right behind them the whole time. "Mr. Mercer," she said, trying to smooth her voice into that clipped, authoritative tone she always used at HOA meetings. The one that worked on the couple across the street who always nodded along with her lectures about paint colors and lawn heights. But here, in my hallway, her voice cracked around the edges. "You're in violation of..." "Stop," I cut her off. "Don't embarrass yourself." She tried to square her shoulders. But it was hard to look powerful when you were standing in a stranger's house, caught red-handed with your flashlight shaking like a leaf. Her eyes darted toward the window, as if she could just slip back, out the way she came. But I saw, it the flicker of realization. She knew. The house was sealed. Jake's silent alarm had tripped the system into full lockdown. Every door reinforced, every window locked down with steel she never even knew was there. "David, let's be reasonable," she tried again, softer this time. "This is a simple compliance check. Your shutters." Your eye held up the tablet. The screen glowed with her image in night vision. Every frame already recorded, time-stamped, and doubled up onto the backup server. I tapped the screen, and her own voice filled the hallway. "Violation. Unacceptable. Order." She froze like she'd just been tasered. "Reasonable," I said, letting the irony drip. "You crawled through my window at 2 in the morning, while my son was asleep. And you think this is about shutters?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen Blackman didn't have a rule book ready. I stepped closer, calm, steady. Not fast, not threatening, just deliberate. "The way you move," when you already know the ending. You thought you were the predator, I said quietly. But this house doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me and Jake, and it's been watching you since the second you touched that window. Her flashlight beam jittered across the walls, landing on the family photos again. Sarah's smile froze her. Maybe she thought she could still bluff her way out, call this a misunderstanding, some bizarre misfiled regulation. But even she knew there was no misunderstanding here. She was inside a cage she hadn't even seen being built. Every word you've said is recorded, I went on. Every step you've taken, it's already backed up in 3 different places. If I wanted, I could send it to the police with 1 click. You're not going to bury this with red tape. You can't write a violation notice big enough to cover what you just did. For the first time, her bravado cracked. I saw it in her eyes. She realized too late she'd played the wrong game. She dropped the flashlight. It clattered against the hardwood, beams spinning wild across the ceiling. Her hands trembled as she tried to lift them like surrender might fix what she'd done. Please, she whispered. And here's the part where I wish I could tell you I felt triumphant, like a hero standing over a vanquished villain, but that's not how it felt. It felt heavy, ugly, like looking at the wreckage of a car crash you'd known was coming but couldn't stop. Because what do you really win? Catching someone like Karen. You don't win peace. You don't win normal. You just stop one more line from being crossed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move closer. I just stood there, steady, and told her the truth. You're finished, Karen. Whatever power you thought you had, it's gone. You don't come near my house again. You don't come near my son. From tonight on, you are nothing but a name on a file. She swallowed hard, lips trembling, but she didn't argue. She couldn't. The evidence was glowing in my hand. The house itself had already judged her guilty. I leaned down and picked up her flashlight, clicked it off, set it on the table by the hallway, as if to remind her how ridiculous she looked, breaking into a house with a $10 flashlight from Home Depot, while my entire system cataloged her every move. She stood there for a second longer, like a puppet with its strings cut. Then I told her to walk. Back down the hallway, back through the laundry room, back to the window she'd crawled in through. The steel locks hissed open one by one as I released them, only long enough to let her slide out. The house let her go, but only because I allowed it. When she finally disappeared into the night, the silence returned. The kind of silence that doesn't press on you anymore. The kind that feels earned. I stayed there for a while, standing in the hall outside Jake's room. My hand hovered over his doorknob, but I didn't go in. I didn't want to steal his sleep. Not tonight. He'd done his part. His alarm trigger had been the domino that sealed everything, and maybe he didn't even realize it yet. But that button meant he wasn't just the one being protected anymore. He was part of the defense, my partner. For 2 years, I'd carried the weight alone, watching, guarding, building the system piece by piece. Tonight I felt it shift. Not lighter, not easier, but shared. It wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. I whispered her name into the silencer and let the moment settle. She'd have hated all of this. She would have told me I went too far, that I let fear eat the life we'd built. But maybe she would have smiled too, knowing her son wasn't just safe, but strong. Knowing he'd stepped into the watch with me. The red lights on the panel blinked back to green. The system reset. The house exhaled, and I exhaled with it. Jake slept on, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing guard alone.